I want to welcome everyone to another offering of the Patterson Museum Foundation's webinar series featuring both local historians and issues of interest to folks in Paterson and Passaic County, as well as our other parallel series, Stories Behind the Story, Conversations with Passaic County historian Ed Smike. So this is our next installment. It's the first one of the we'll call it the fall 2022 season. We're very happy to have all of you on board. I see a couple more people coming in. There's Sharon Briggs, one of our trustees, has just joined. And so here's how we'll run it as we have in the past. We'll have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So if you've got questions for Jennifer, we'll hold them to the end, and then you can type them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, where you can pose a question or a comment to Jennifer, and we will broadcast it for her, so she'll be able to respond to it. We'll also put, if you feel so inclined, we're going to put a link to our Patterson Museum Foundation donation account through PayPal. So if you feel so inclined, you'd like to throw a little donation to us tonight, that would be wonderful, because it helps us pay for this series and other things that we're doing at the Patterson Museum with our friends here. You see tonight, you see Jack DeStefano and you see Heather Garside. Jack, you want to take it for a minute here and welcome everyone?
Sure. Thank you, Glenn. And I thank everyone for joining us tonight. I'm really looking forward to this program with Jennifer. We've been working with her for a while. Actually, our former curator, Bruce Balistrieri, he assisted with some of the photos in her book, and you were really kind enough to include my uncle, who was a former Paterson police officer, Jennifer. So, the book has a lot of meaning for most of us, especially, with the Italian heritage. Now I could say my name's Giacomo. You don't have to do just Jack. But no, this is going to be a real treat for everyone. I know, again, and the museum also thanks you. Anytime that you come and volunteer at the museum, I mean, you're just a real hit. From being a former teacher, you're like one of the best promoters of Paterson that I know. Thank you. I'm looking forward to it. I think everyone else is going to really enjoy it.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Jack. And the wizardress of Oz, aka Heather Garside, is the one operating the system for us tonight. She's also more commonly known as the curator of the Paterson Museum, and so a lot of the things that go on in terms of the exhibits and stuff, she's the young woman in charge of that. And you will be hearing from her in a month or two. She's going to give a presentation about the digitalization of the glass negatives at the museum. So I encourage you to follow us on Facebook. That's where we're making most of the announcements regarding the future events. This coming Thursday, we will have a session with Ed Smike and his Stories Behind the Story, and his special guest will be former Paterson Mayor Pat Kramer. And we'll be focusing on not only just Pat's growing up in the city of Paterson, but also, most importantly, his role in historic preservation and in the museum itself, and so many other related things. So we're looking forward to that as well. So again, I want to thank you everyone for coming on board tonight. And so let me tell you about this young woman, Jennifer Ranu. She's in the corner there. You'll see her. She's going to be our speaker for tonight. She's got a very impressive resume, believe me. But I'm going to pick out a few things I think that are perhaps the most important. Of course, she's a Paterson native. That's the most important thing here. She was born and raised in Paterson. She's a retired educator. So she was a school teacher in Paterson, as well as other, not just Paterson, but other surrounding communities. She has an impressive lineup of books that she's authored. Skate Key is probably her best known book, I would imagine. I mean, that's my own impression, but we'll hear from Jennifer about that. She also had a book called Colorful Journey. And of course, the one tonight we're going to talk about perhaps has eclipsed Skate Key, maybe. We'll hear from her about that. And that is her book on Italians of Greater Paterson. She's been a volunteer for several years now at the Great Falls. You'll see her at the falls again during good weather and stuff. Outdoors having displays and doing all sorts of interactive things with visitors to the falls. And like I said, you'll find her there, particularly on weekends and things. So We have quite an impressive, again, she has quite an impressive resume, but I think those are the things that we know her for. And of course, we're excited to hear from her tonight about the Italian presence in Paterson for many, many years. And then again, the book that she literally put together to describe that. So Jennifer, I'm turning it over to you. And
Thank
now will be
you.
the time she's going to share a screen with us here. So she's going to share a screen and
I
we'll
do
see a
this.
PowerPoint. There you go. Here we
I got
go. Perfect.
Okay.
There it is.
Okay. Well, thank you
There
very
it is.
much. And I want to thank everybody for joining me tonight. The book Italians of Greater Paterson. I want to first thank all the people who gave me pictures and their stories, because without those pictures and those stories, this wouldn't be. And I also want to thank Congressman Bill Pascrell for writing the foreword for Italians of Greater Paterson. Now, one thing that I want to make sure that everybody understands is that on that cover, those two little girls that are on the cover of Italians of Greater Paterson, neither of those two little girls are me. Those girls are the sisters of George Crishone. Remember George Crishone, the photographer who had his studio on Market Street in Paterson? George Crishone did the yearbooks for Central High School and Eastside High School and Kennedy High School. He also did, to say, the photos for my photo album for my wedding. So, just to say, this was George Crishone's family. And so I'd like to start. Let's see. Okay, I got this. I hope. No. I got it. Here we go. Want to start by saying, okay, a little over 200 years ago, George Washington and Alexander Hamilton and Pierre L'Enfant, they had a picnic lunch, sat at the Great Falls, rode their horses actually to the Great Falls, and planned the first industrial city in America, Paterson. Now, back in those days, you didn't plug it in and get electricity. It was water power, kinetic energy. If you see that, the energy and motion there, my goodness, when they saw that, they must have known exactly this was the place to start the industry, textile industry, especially. We had a big war with England. We didn't want to buy shirts and pants from them anymore. So therefore, we're going to have to make them ourselves. Okay, so the next
Jennifer,
thing we're looking at here is the
Jennifer.
SUM. Well, I have history and stories that are not in history books. To say that the SUM, the water from the Passaic River is channeled into the roof of this building and then into turbines that are inside that building that spin and generate the power to make the machines and factories work. Well, having been an educator, one day I took my class on a field trip and we went inside that building. Yes, that had to be about in the 1980s or 90s that I was teaching and we did that.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Jennifer, can I interrupt you for just 1 second? Sorry, folks. Could you hit your, where it says slideshow and make it full screen? You see on the orange, right up top.
Slideshow.
Yeah, you see where you got lit up home screen, go to slideshow.
Okay.
Click that. And then hit from current slide. Just go down to the left. That's it right there. Click that.
Better?
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't know. I'm sorry. Well, anyway, to get back to this story, this field trip that I took was very educational. Very. We could see how that water was coming in and spinning those turbines. However, picture yourself in a building that is all closed in and that water gushing in and thundering and smashing around those turbines. I have to tell you, I came out of that building with quite a headache. So anyway, very educational. Well, now, okay, we're going to have industry here. You're going to have to build factories, going to have people work in those factories. The neighborhood around the Great Falls, that area was originally settled by Irish immigrants. That was called the Dublin section of Paterson. Then the Italians moved in. Well, you see here, my grandparents came to America. My mother's mother came from Naples and her father from Sicily. My father's father and mother and my father came from Abruzzi, from Scundrone, Italy. My father was only 6 years old when he came to America, but they came here looking for the opportunity to have a better life for themselves and for their children. Well, as we see in this picture, immigrants coming across the ocean. The letter that we see here was written by a man named, his last name is Scalzetti, and he wrote this letter to Margaret. And he said, to say in the letter, he's saying, I have arrived. I'm really glad I'm here. I can't wait to meet the family and the friends. However, this was a very, very long trip. So Giuseppe Scalzetti did this. Now, I had relatives that came to America, and to say Maria Cristina became a naturalized citizen in America. Now, her husband, Angelo DeLuca, well, Angelo DeLuca, I heard their daughter, if she was alive today, she'd be around 96 years old. When I was a little girl, she told me the only time she ever saw her daddy was on a Sunday afternoon. Her mother would make a picnic lunch and they would go to the factory. Her mom would put a blanket down on the ground. The children would sit on the blanket and wait for daddy to come out of the factory. And they would sit there, they'd have a picnic lunch, 15 minutes, and then daddy would have to go back to work. Well, now we know what happened. To say that Angelo DeLuca belonged to the Dyers local union, when the unions came in, they went, of course, to the Botto house, Maria and Pietro Botto, and hailed and invited people to their house to sit under the grapevine and talk about better working conditions. Well, then things improved. But to say what life was like for those people, he worked 7 days a week, 12 to 15 hours a day. Now, I had relatives and neighbors I lived on Jersey Street at the foot of Garrett Mountain. And my neighbors down the street, Micah, Maria, and Zaldo and their family, and another neighbor who lived across the street, Bernardo Laporta, these people were very hardworking people. And their children, everybody walked to work. If you owned one car back in the day, then well, that was pretty big. But the fact of the matter is, these people walked to work. Now, down the street from Jersey Street, down the hill to Market Street, there were factories that were all through that area, and they worked many, many hours a day. Now, here to say, Gabriel Rocco came to America from Italy and with his family, and his sons worked in the silk mills and later started a printing business in the basement of their home on Maple Street in Paterson, New Jersey, the Rocco Press. And they went for many, many years. They were absolutely successful. So there were lots of things that people did besides working in factories. But, practice makes perfect. And here we're looking at the son, Philip, who became a tailor. Well, I'm sure he learned from working in the factories, he learned. Now, I have to tell you that I do have history stories that are not in history books. My mother told me that her dad, my grandpa, was a tailor, and that he would make shirts and pants for men and package them. And then on the package, he would write the address of the man who bought the shirt or the pants. And then he would tell her, now she was maybe about 8 or 9 years old. He would tell her, put on your roller skates and you deliver the package to the guy who lives on, and whatever the address was, Market Street or Marshall Street or wherever, she would have to deliver the package. Now you see what I have, a roller skate. This roller skate is a metal roller skate that needs a skate key. And my mom was the delivery girl. Now, she was only a little girl at the time, but the fact of the matter is, I tell the kids today, back in those days, there was no FedEx, there was no UPS. My mom was the delivery girl. Now, to say, when she told me her story, that was maybe about 11 or 12 years ago. I knew my mommy wasn't going to be here to tell the next generation. So I wrote her story. I typed it up in Microsoft Word just to save it. And then I had a relative who said, me too, me too. I roller skated too. I roller skated down Marshall Street. They called me Roly Poly. Well, I said, okay, I'll save your story too. Before I knew it, I had 22 stories. Many of them take place in Paterson from the 1930s through the 1980s, when people roller skated on metal skates that needed a skate key. Now, in spite of the fact that the people may have had different ethnic backgrounds, maybe different religions, they all roller skated on metal skates that needed a skate key when they were kids. Now, like I say, they had to, to say not everybody worked in the factories. There were other types of jobs. And here we're looking at Luigi Rocco, worked to produce crushed stone and sand at the Trap Rock Quarry in Paterson, New Jersey. These are stone crushers and ditch diggers. Now, my father told me that my grandpa, his daddy, was a ditch digger. He said, a ditch digger? He said, what do you think back in those days? They had no bulldozers. Men with shovels and picks. They had to dig the dirt and crush the rocks to put in the foundations for these buildings. Buildings like factories, churches, schools. They had to do this by hand with sledgehammers. And they worked very hard to build these buildings. Okay, so now factories were being built all through the city. And okay, the Great Falls may not have been enough power, generating enough power to supply the energy for all of these factories. So ditch diggers they're going to dig the dirt and channel the water from the Passaic River down, they called it the Upper Raceway, and they channeled the water to man-made waterfalls. Now, I actually took these pictures myself several years ago when water was channeled there. And now this water, parallel to Spruce Street, would go under Spruce Street, travel parallel to Market Street. Now we had an upper raceway, a middle raceway, and then back down to go into the Passaic River, a lower raceway. And that would then generate the power with man-made waterfalls. Okay, now my daddy told me this too with the upper raceway. He said he went to school number 2 when he was a little boy. And in the hot days, I guess May, June, very, very hot days in school, kids were sweating. He said at 3 o'clock when the bell rang, the teacher would open the doors from the building, school number 2, and all the little boys would run up the street to the back race. He called it the upper raceway, the back race. They would take off all their clothes and jump in and swim to cool off. That was my daddy's story. Now, many people worked in factories in the textile industry, which was booming. And I actually inherited these thimbles and the sewing machine and the thread and tape measure from a relative who used these. Now, to say the textile industry booming, yes. And to say Catalina Lambert, silk mill owner, built a castle in Garrett Mountain for his wife and his family because it was a booming industry. Well, okay, so now when new things were invented, they too were made in Paterson. When locomotive engines were invented, train, you see what I've got here? A train engine, okay. Well, the building you're looking at there, this is a model of the Rogers Locomotive Building. Today, it's the Paterson Museum. But I can remember asking my daddy, come, that building has such big doors. And he said, how do you think they got those train engines out? They had train tracks that came from the building out of Spruce Street to Market Street. So actually, horses pulled with chains, pulled the engine out of the building so that they could then put it on the tracks and take it to where its destination would be. Now today, it's the Paterson Museum. Okay, when airplanes were invented, airplane parts were made in Paterson at Wright Aeronautical. Carmela Grossi was 16 years old, working in this factory to make airplane parts. Okay, now as the Italian immigrants kept, coming into Paterson to get jobs and work, they needed a place, they needed places for worship. There was an architect who was born in Italy, Joseph Bellomo, and he had his business on Market Street. Joseph Bellomo was the architect that designed many of the buildings, include the churches in Paterson. Well, now you see that, okay, you need money to build these churches. Angelo DeLuca gave $2 a month for 2 years to make $50 to give to the church for the construction of St. Michael's Church in Paterson. Originally, that church was a Methodist church on the corner of Elm Street, and it was called Cross Street. Today, it's Chauncey Street. But this Methodist church was converted to, actually was designed as the mother church for the immigrant Italian community in New Jersey, Paterson, New Jersey. On December 15th, 1978, St. Michael the Archangel Church became a National Historical Landmark. Now, I'm going to tell you that I go to St. Michael's Church every Sunday. 10 o'clock Mass is an Italian English Mass. Beautiful. Well, inside the St. Michael's Church is a pipe organ. Now, Carlo Paragallo came to America from Italy, and his youngest son, John Paragallo, founded the Paragallo Organ Company. Now, the first organ, the first pipe organ that they made is in St. Michael's Church. The Paragallo Organ Company has been in business for over 100 years, and 4 generations of Paragallos are working in this business. And to be honest with you, to tell you that the church, the St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York, the pipe organ that is there was made here in Paterson, New Jersey, Paragallo organs, and they are still making pipe organs all over this country, all over the world. Well, the Italian immigrants were moving in and moving to different sections in Paterson. So in the Sandy Hill section, we see St. Anthony's Church, Blessed Sacrament in the Riverside section, and Our Lady of Pompeii in the Stony Road section of Paterson. Now, one thing that I remember as a little girl, that St. Michael's, they always had feasts, they had parties, parades. This band, in this band, is my grandpa. My grandpa played, I'm going to show you right here. This is my grandpa right here. He played the trombone in this band. And this man right here was the conductor. That's Benjamin Saletti. He was my grandmother's brother. And we see Monsignor Chanchi over here. But and you see lots of little kids in this band too. This is we're looking at children and adults in St. Michael's band. Now they had feasts, and I definitely remember watching the Holy Name Parade. Well, only men were marching in this parade, and they would be all dressed up in suits and ties, and all the ladies and the girls would be on the sidewalk, whether it was Broadway or Main Street, watching them in this wonderful parade. Well, now the Feast of St. Michael is celebrated every year. And here we see Giuseppe Orlandi, who was born in Italy. Father Joe, we called him. And he spent many, many years at St. Michael's Church. We have Maria Marzella Zaffarino, Maria Delizia. And in this other picture, Michael Tazzi. Well, Miguel Tazzi, we're looking at, this picture is in the basement of St. Michael's where they had the feasts. And you take a look at this table. Oh my goodness, all this homemade cookies and cake and Italian wine. Well, now, Gaetano Federici, born in Castel Grande, Italy. He came to live in Paterson, New Jersey when he was 7 years old. Now, Federici studied and he became a sculptor. He went to New York and learned to be, perfect it. Many statues, reliefs, busts, and are decorated in churches, parks, and buildings throughout the city of Paterson. He made many of them in his garage studio on North 8th Street. Now, I actually took that picture many, many, many years ago, but I did take that picture. And you see the World War I Memorial, Hayden Heights, Pennington Park. This he created. The statue of St. Michael overpowering Lucifer is over the front doors of St. Michael's Church. Now, the Dublin Spring Monument, I've got to tell you, when I was a little girl, my mother used to take us downtown every Saturday. We'd walk, she'd hold our hands. We'd walk, we lived on Jersey Street. So we used to walk down Mill Street. And I used to see this statue and always wonder, maybe a little boy died and they buried him here? No. Back in the day, well, they didn't have, we'll turn the faucet and get running water in the kitchen sink. Mom would say to her kids, go get the bucket and go get me some spring water. There was a water spring on Mill Street and Oliver Street. However, when the factories were working and many, many, many of them dumping their garbage into the water, into the river, polluting the river, the water became polluted and they weren't able to use that spring water anymore. So Gaetano Federici created this statue of a little boy with a bucket, and it says no more because they had to close that water spring. Many of Federici's statues are throughout the city, in front of City Hall, in front of the courthouse, in front of churches like St. John's Cathedral, many of them. Now, here's a story that is real. Federici was like a celebrity. And whenever he came next door to me, Mary Lissardo DeLuca, they were very close friends, the family, very close friends. She invited Federici to come for dinner. Now, the people would come out, run to the front gate and watch him come up the street. Federici's coming, Federici's coming. Well, to say thank you to Mary for having made this absolutely wonderful dinner, Gaetano Federici asked her for a bar of ivory soap. And what he did with a steak knife and an up pick, you see, he carved the profile of Mary in the bar of ivory soap. One side says Ivory, the other side says Federici. Wow. Now I have something here too that Gaetano Federici made. And now this is a plaster relief of Joan of Arc. This was left to me by family members that Federici, when he went to dinner or somewhere, he would, want to say thank you, and he'd give you a gift, something like this. Well, now, Lou Costello, Gaetano Federici created a bust of Lou Costello. Well, Lou Costello's real name is Louis Francis Cristillo, and he went to school number 15 in the Sandy Hill section of Paterson. He also went to St. Anthony's Church and St. Anthony's School for Catechism. Back in the day, that's what we called it. Today, I think they call it CCD, but we went for catechism, and he went to St. Anthony's for that. When Lou Costello grew up in Paterson, but became a very, very famous celebrity, movies and television shows, very often told people that he was from Paterson, New Jersey. Well, Lou Costello would come, to visit his family. They were still in Paterson. Everybody lived here. He came to visit his Cristillo family. He'd go to St. Anthony's Church in his old neighborhood at Sandy Hill. Now you see them all around that table. Well, that's basically what it always looked like back in the day. Yes, Lou Costello loved sports. In fact, when he was a kid growing up in Paterson, he played basketball and he loved to do boxing. Well, he came and they had Little League baseball players, and they took this picture. Bill Pascrell Jr. was a little boy on that team, and he is in that picture. Bill Pascrell Jr. served in the United States Army, mayor of Paterson, and he serves in the United States Congress. Now, to say Bill Pascrell credits his parents and his immigrant grandparents for putting in him the value of being a bridge builder, one who brings together diverse people in neighborhoods to make a better society. Now, that is me with then Mayor Bill Pascrell. When I was a teacher in Paterson, took another field trip, had my students come to Pennington Park to do a cleanup, and Bill Pascrell was mayor of Paterson then. Again, I want to thank him for writing the foreword for Italians of Greater Paterson. Okay, now I lived on Jersey Street, a little girl, and the last house on the top of the street, Jersey Street at the foot of Garrett Mountain, that house was co-owned by brothers Donato and Vito Laraya. Well, their wives, Julia and Raphael, they lived there, and they had a beautiful, beautiful family that, many of them worked in factories. Well, I tell the kids today that back in the day, people walked to work. The kids walked to school. We didn't have school buses. We went downtown to church. Wherever you went, you were going to walk. We didn't wear sneakers except for gym, or you call it physical education. We wore shoes, and we would wear our soles and heels out because we were walking all the time. Well, Dan Donato became a shoemaker on Grand Street, and so he would repair your shoes. This was a job other than working in factories. People had other jobs, shoemakers. Now, if we went to Dan, the shoemaker, very often he would give us a heel because we would use this heel to play hopscotch. Yes, we would make a hopscotch in the middle of the street with a piece of chalk. We only had white chalk in those days. Make the boxes and throw the heel into the box so we could play hopscotch. We played in the street a lot. Jersey Street was a dead-end street, so we could play there. A lot of the boys played stickball. We had a broom, a wooden handle broom, and mom would sweep the floor, the bristles would get flat, and then you'd cut the bristles off and use the stick to play stickball. You had to have a pink Spalding. First base was the telephone pole. Second base, the manhole in the middle of the street. Third base was the fire hydrant. And if you hit this Spalding and it went to Garrett Mountain, you'd get a home run. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And thank you for the heel, Dan the shoemaker. Well, his brother Vito had oh my goodness, in the backyard, I can remember going back there, live goats that used to not just stay in the backyard. They would walk. This is Jersey Street. They would walk. One time I did see that goat in my backyard. He also had live chickens. How many times he gave me real chicken eggs that they were just laid to bring home to my mom. He would also give me, we call it basil, parsley, peppers. Oh, I mean, absolutely wonderful. Other people had gardens as well, very similar. Here we see Giuseppe Amato picking tomatoes. The tomato plants were taller than he. And Amelia Marchese watering the plants. Of course, they had to have water. You had to water them every day. Now, there were lots of people who went in the backyard because, like I say, in those days, there was no air conditioning. So people would go in the backyard and you know, just to say, here's Giuseppe Mastromoro with his friends with guitars and mandolins, and they would sing. Oh, solo mio, Santa Lucia, and Funicula. I remember hearing these songs in the backyard. Well, now back in the day when mom did not have a washing machine, she would wash the clothes by hand and wring them out and hang them on the clothesline in the backyard. And the kids maybe in a little blow up pool. This is in Maria Zaffarino's backyard. Now, also, we're looking at ladies who were sitting in lawn chairs after a long day of cleaning the house and cooking. Now, another thing that people did, and these are the Grossi girls, many of them crocheted and made homemade pot holders and crocheted to make trim around the pillowcases and all types of things. Very, very, like I said, no air conditioning. People many times sat outside. Bernie Laporta, now this is what a lot of guys did. Bernie Laporta helping his grandfather, Giuseppe Mastromoro, in the cellar, pulling the grapes off the stems to make wine. Now, I have to tell you, that was my job. I did that too for my daddy. Okay. Almost every October, my daddy would make homemade wine. And yeah, there I was in the basement, in the cellar, pulling the grapes off the stems so that he could take the grapes, put them in the wine crusher, and then turn it and crush those grapes, make the juice, put in, you know, what he had to put in yeast to ferment it. And in a couple of weeks, he would have homemade wine. Now, if you didn't have enough grapes from your grapevine in the backyard, you could buy grapes in cases. And here we're looking at Giuseppe Mastromoro in his house on Mill Street with cases that had grapes in them. Now, one other to say, my mother would say to me, get on your bike. I got it right here. Get on your bike and go down to the stores on Grand Street and get me a quart of milk, a loaf of bread. If you didn't have the milkman, you would put the milk and bread or whatever in basket. And then she would ask me to stop off at the A&P. Now, this A&P was owned by Charles Crescenzo Festa, and it was on Grand Street in Paterson. Now, to say Festa's A&P, my mother loved the fact that he would grind coffee beans and make fresh fresh coffee. And I would bring that back home to my mom because I would ride my bike home for that. Now, look at this. We had the farmer's market. When was the last time you saw 3 pounds of bananas for 99 cents? Patterson had, to say, Italian bakeries all over the city. I mean, Lazara's was one. Many, many, many others like Canizares and Minardi's. I mean, just lots of them. But this story here is to say the American dream. We're looking at Nancy Nunziato. Nancy here, who came from Italy, didn't speak English at all. Her mother had passed away. And so here she was in America, in Paterson. As a teenager, she got a job working in Lazara's. She not only worked in Lazara's, she worked at S&S Kresge's on Main Street in the 5 and 10 cent store. Nancy learned to speak English because she was working in these stores and talking to people. Well, the American dream. Well, to tell you the truth, Nancy grew up. She went to schools in Paterson. She went to high school. She got married. And then one night she said she had a dream. And her mother was speaking to her in the dream. And her mother said to her, "Congratulations, you graduated from college." And Nancy said, "Wait a minute." When she woke up, her mother told her she went to college. So Nancy enrolled in William Paterson College, and Nancy became a teacher. Nancy taught in John F. Kennedy High School and Eastside High School. She taught children or students to speak Italian and to speak Spanish. Nancy, the American dream. Well, now on Sundays, what did people do? Oh, they went to church. If they went to church, they came back home, sat around the kitchen table and ate their donuts and had coffee and would talk. And here we're looking at Dominic and Rose Costabile's house and Maria Cristina and Angelo DeLuca. Basically, that's what they did on Sunday. Sunday afternoon, wow, where did you go? You went to visit Nona and Nono. This is now the Ganges, the Ganji family that went to go visit their grandmother and grandfather. If you sat under the grapevine, fine, if they had it. If not, the whole family would be there. And Nona was going to have a lot of stuff that she cooked that you would eat. Well, here we look at Colomba Marzella. And in all honesty, I'm looking at the pots on her stove. Those big pots, I think one of them must have boiling water that she's boiling the pasta. And the other pot, no doubt, you're looking at macaroni sauce. Now we're looking at Grace Lasardo and Millie. And at the table, all the flour on that table, no doubt in my mind that they were making homemade gavadils or homemade macaroni pasta. This is my mom and dad, Julius Giulio Tiratilli and Lena Giostra Tiratilli, two absolutely wonderful people. My dad was an immigrant, came to Paterson to live. He was only a little boy. He went to schools in Paterson. He actually went to the vocational high school in Paterson, and to say, then went to World War II, fought in the war, came back home. Lena and Giulio got married, and now here I am. Well, they lived on Jersey Street at the foot of Garrett Mountain. Now, there were lots of things that I learned from them. For one thing, Dad would take us in the summer down the shore, and we'd go fishing. We would, fish, and we would catch flounder. And then in August, we would catch crabs. And my mom taught me how to make spaghetti and crabs. So good. Daddy always made homemade wine. I told you that before. But on Sunday, I definitely remember every Sunday, as long as it wasn't raining, my dad and the Italian men in the neighborhood would all go up the street on Jersey Street to the canal bank. That's where the Morris Canal was. And they would play bocce and drink homemade wine. Now, as a little girl, I went to school. I went to school number 3, and then I went to school number 8. So we'd have to go up Garrett Mountain and cross over the mountain to go to school number 8. But we would actually be walking by the Morris Canal, where the Morris Canal was. That soil was so sandy. And I always wondered why, because the rest of the mountain, the dirt was dirt and grass. But that area was very, very sandy, perfect for playing the game bocce. And those were my father's bocce balls and his wine that he actually made. Now we're looking at Amelia Marchese, who loved to bake, and look at her there. Look at that bread, how absolutely delicious and wonderful it looks. A lot of hard work. What did we make? Easter pies, rice pies, pizza again, or pizza pena. I learned how to make all this stuff. My mom taught me how, because of course, you know, I was over there at the table with her. And now spinach pies. Oh yes, always delicious spinach pies. And then of course, I learned how to make pizzelles. Not for anything, but these are fantastic. Now, I don't just make them for Christmas. These are the ones I've got now for Halloween. And they are so crispy and crunchy and pizzelles. So it's so delicious. Now I thank, to say thank them for all those wonderful recipes. What did they do for fun? Here we look at Marge Livornia, who would go roller skating in an indoor roller skating rink at the Paterson Recreation Center. And then we're looking here at a finished basement in, and to say paneling. Wow, that came out, I guess, around the 1950s and 60s. Oops, sorry, wrong way. There we go. Demolition and construction, Vincenzo De Gangi, a Paterson bricklayer mason. Yes, this is another, occupation that people had. And here he was building chimneys and fireplaces in homes. And the picture on the other side with all these men were putting in the blocks for Otilio's building on Preakness Avenue. This is my grandma, Maria Giostra, as she displays pictures of her sons. Now, these are heroes serving in the United States military during World War II. Those are my uncles and my dad in the picture. My uncle, Mike Giostra, was wounded in action in Luzon in the Philippines and had Purple Heart. We're looking at Gaetano Didymo, who served in World War II as well. And Gene Didymo, his son, who served in the United States Army stationed in Vietnam, received a Purple Heart, Bronze Star Medal, Combat Infantry Badge. Heroes. Here's Joseph Laporta, the U.S. Navy. Now the picture of his mom with her apron on, about to give her son a big hug and a kiss because she knows he was going to be leaving and hoping and praying that he'd come back. Father Mark, heroes. Father Mark was born in Italy, and Father Mark was ordained to become a priest in the Paterson Diocese. He served at St. Gerard's Magella Church and was Monsignor at the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist in Paterson. Now, to say Father Mark had masses for these motorcycle club that he had, and he'd have a mass, and then they would all get on their motorcycles, and then they would go through the city. But Father Mark, when I started teaching in St. Gerard's School in Paterson, Father Mark was the pastor there. And we have Don Rizzo and Santo Di Stefano, both born in Paterson, New Jersey. Don Rizzo was captain of the Paterson Police Department, and Santo Di Stefano served in the Paterson Police Department for 30 years, over 30 years. Okay, went the wrong way. There we go. Now, clubs in Paterson. The Italian Circle, well, mostly for men, okay? And they would go here, and yes, it was a place to go when they weren't working and they weren't home. They would go to the Italian Circle, where they would have lots of parties and play games and have fun. Now, Gelati's ice cream, was Boonstra's originally, and then Gelati's came, and the best Italian lemon ice, fantastic ice cream. Dom's Meat Market. Oh, yes. Well, of course, I say there were no ShopRite, was no, we didn't have any of those supermarkets that we have today. And you would go to these meat markets on Grand Street or Slater Street or throughout the city and get, to say diverse types of food. Now we're looking here at Joseph Manola Vignali, who, to say he owned Vinola's liquor store on River Street in Paterson. Very diverse. And we're looking at Anthony DeFranco, who say he is a safe and vault specialist and bonded locksmith. He still has his store on McBride Avenue in Paterson. Tom Fuscaldo, bumblebees. Oh, yes. And he has beehives in his backyard with honey, and oh my goodness, so many beehives. Tom Fuscaldo, who ran for governor of New Jersey at one time. And then there's Joseph Ordini, who owns the business of Joe Ordini's Pools on River Street. Joe Ordini played football for Eastside High School. Very diverse. Now we're looking at talents. Lazarus didn't just have a bakery. Lazarus had a music hall where people would go, Broadway shows, movies, kiddie shows, meetings. They had, to say, benefits, Italian shows and Jewish shows and weddings at Lazarus Music Hall. And now, Floyd Vivino. Floyd Vivino was born and raised in Paterson. However, he became a star in movies. He had his own TV show, and he was in movies Good Morning America, Crazy People, Mr. Wonderful, and he appeared on his own television and still has his own radio show, Uncle Floyd. And there's Nancy Tiratilli, who was born and raised in Paterson, and she served as an educator and is a composer, lyricist, playwright. Nancy wrote a play called Winners of the Heart. And in this play stars Grandma Fiducci, who says to her granddaughter, "Some of you can't find a nice Italian boy." Nancy. And now we're looking at the Emeralds. The Emeralds who, to say, a block on Emerson Avenue was named the Emerald Experience Way. Well, these guys were teenagers and playing and singing, and they became very, very famous. We're looking down at the picture on the bottom with Bill Pascrell, who was Congressman Bill Pascrell and Mayor Torres, and they changed the name of that block for this wonderful group, the Emeralds, because in George Jarrow's house, they would rehearse for years. They were in the basement rehearsing, and that's why they changed the name of that street. Now, there are lots of athletes in Paterson, and we're looking at the Paterson Panthers football team, but I definitely remember my daddy taking me to James Cascone's football team. Well, Jimmy Cascone was a contractor, and he had his trucks and everything parked on the top of Jersey Street, and Jimmy Cascone sponsored this football team, and they played at Totowa Oval, which is in Westside Park. We used to go to those games all the time. Absolutely fantastic. And the Paterson Italian soccer team and this is now 1985. Lots of athletes from Paterson. So now, what do I say? Lots of people ask me questions. They say, do you speak Italian? I tell them no. I was born and raised in Paterson, New Jersey. I don't speak Italian because my mom and dad really only spoke English to us, their children. They spoke Italian to themselves if they didn't want us to know what they were talking about. However, I make fantastic meatballs. I make eggplant parmesan. I make, to say absolutely fantastic. I can make gavadillas. And my family, I can't tell you how much I appreciate the fact that I inherited from them wonderful, wonderful everything and ways and things that I do, because my parents and my ancestors were wonderful role models. Now, to say that I am the author of Skate Key, Italians of Greater Paterson, and Colorful Journey. Now, Colorful Journey is, I am the author. My granddaughters are the co-authors. That's Juliana and Carolina Ranu. Now, what happened here is that when I was a little girl, my daddy used to take us up Garrett Mountain. We would cross over the railroad tracks, which is now Route 80, that path. We would go to the water spring to get ice cold spring water. We could go to Lambert Castle. And we would do that when I was a little girl. However, we wrote Colorful Journey. The history is real. Who was Catalina Lambert? Why do you have a castle in Paterson, New Jersey? What is the history? The history is real. The fiction is that instead of my daddy taking us up Garrett Mountain, a groundhog takes the kids on a colorful journey up Garrett Mountain, but they have to guess his name. So basically, that's what I do. I am a volunteer at the Great Falls National Historical Park. I am a volunteer at the Paterson Museum. That's what I'm doing now. I had been a teacher, 1st grade, 4th grade, 8th grade, high school science. I was the athletic academic advisor at John F. Kennedy High School, mentoring athletes, and I became an adjunct professor at Montclair State University. I am very grateful for all of my teachers, for everyone who were wonderful role models for me. And I hope that this next generation we will reflect on them the way my ancestors reflected on me. And I thank you for coming tonight. And basically, that's my story.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. That was a wonderful presentation. You covered a lot of ground about Italians in Paterson. We've got a few comments in already. The first one is from Jason Vellante, and you must know him. And he points out, he says, I'll read his comment and question. Our PS21 students have enjoyed Jennifer Ranu's stories for years. I'll be sure to share this gem as well with them. And just so everyone knows, this, I didn't mention it earlier, but this session, this webinar will be posted in a couple weeks to the Paterson Museum webpage. So to the YouTube page for the Paterson Museum. So we'll be able to enjoy it going forward. So if any of you tonight have friends who missed it tonight, you can share the link with them once it's posted. So he has a question for you, Jennifer. What's the difference you see between the immigrants of yesteryear versus the immigrants that are coming today into Paterson?
Well, I do meet, I'm down at the Great Falls and I do go into schools, so I do see the immigrants of today. I honestly, except for the fact that, we have television with color TV and they're working on computers today. It's a lot different, but to say, I think the families are smaller. I know, most of my friends and all will tell you that, like my grandparents had at least 5, 6 kids you're talking about. Some had 10 in their family. And so with that, what it is, what it costs today to say, even for a pair of sneakers for children, if you have 1 or 2 kids today, but years ago, you had to feed, family of 5, 10 kids. I mean, it's just how it was. I know that, to say people still working hard, different
Right.
kinds of jobs. That's all.
No, exactly. Thank you. The next comment is from Joe, and I'm gonna butcher his name here. Joe Palancar. He asks or makes the point: how were Italians in Paterson treated during World War II? His grandmother and her sister immigrated legally, but never took the citizenship test, so they were required to register with the police department and notify the police whenever they planned to travel outside the city. Do you have any comments on that?
I don't know, that I don't know. To say, I mean, I only know what my mother and, what they told me, that, how my grandmother, she had several sons and they were all out World War II. They were all fighting in the war. And one of them, to say, my Uncle Mike, I showed you there. I mean, he was very seriously wounded. And, just to say how things were, but they worked. I mean, I know, to say my grandmother worked, they all worked. And I kept working because you didn't have your sons to work and bring you money or anything. You had to get out there and do it.
Right. Well, thank you. A comment from Carla Rizzo is that her dad is watching with her, and she really appreciates and says that you did a great job. So that was from Carla Rizzo.
Thank you.
And then Joe also had one more comment. How were the relationships with the Irish, the Italian and Irish relationship? His grandfather got off the train in downtown Paterson when they moved to the U.S. and unfortunately was pelted with vegetables by the Irish, who feared their jobs would be taken away by the Italians. So any comments on the Italian-Irish relationship?
I'm sure that there were conflicts, I'm sure. But, I mean, that to say, by the time I was born, that was probably already, calmed down. But the fact is, I'm sure that I mean, it'd be like with anybody, you're setting up, you're setting up your area, your streets, your sidewalks, your neighborhood, and then new people move in. It's like, oh, wow. What are you going to do? That's how it is. And that's basically, to say other churches were, not just to say the Irish moving, the Irish were there and the Italians moved in, and then the Italians start building churches, St. Michael's, and, we saw 4 of them there. But, the fact is, that's what it is. I mean,
Right,
to say St. John's Cathedral, that's where the Irish went. And they all had their own places.
Right, and that's sort of the story of most American cities, is that the ethnic neighborhoods change over time. And as you're well aware, the area that we're talking about, Cross Street versus, Chianti Street, is heavily populated by the Peruvians at this point in Paterson's history. So, that's the common element right here. Immigrants move into a city and they bring with their culture. And, we see that in the form of restaurants and other kinds of things. So that's just part of normal evolution of the city. Right.
I mentioned about St. Michael's Church and that they have an Italian English Mass, but they also have the Mass that Latinos that go to it too, because that whole neighborhood now is basically Peruvian, Dominican, and they come to church. So they have their Mass as well, but it's in the same church building. Yeah,
exactly. We have a comment from Joseph Tomzak. He says, thank you, great presentation. And I think a person that you probably know, Renee Kaufman, says that my sister is a true treasure. So there you go.
It's my sister.
And she is a true treasure.
Thank you.
So I think that that takes care of all the Q&A that we have. I want to thank you, Jennifer, for coming on tonight. You know, we appreciate your presentation. It's very interesting. You know, and I don't know that everyone understood, for example, that Giacomo Di Stefano's uncle was one of the photographs that was in there tonight. So it was again, a wonderful, wonderful presentation. So again, thank you. Like I said, I want to thank all of our attendees tonight that came to see this. And again, it'll be posted on YouTube in a couple of weeks, so you can share it with your friends, and it'll live on. So thank you again. And hopefully some of you, if you would like to attend on Thursday night this week, we'll be having, again, Mayor Pat Kramer interviewed by Passaic County historian Ed Smike in his series. So one last time, thank you for coming, and hope we'll see you all soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. That was
Thank you.
perfect. Bravo.
Thank you.